Bill Clinton, aside from being called rapist and predator and all these other issues, he also gets this odd distinction of being considered to be the first black president. I don't know where this came from. I assume that just because he played a saxophone with Arsenio Hall, that this was the quality necessary in order for him to be African American. That said, to this day, there are a lot of African Americans who love Bill Clinton, and I suspect that they love him even though they don't necessarily know what he did in that office. Because fact of the matter is, that same president who gets the moniker as being the first black president, oddly enough, also passed legislation to put people who look like Bill Clinton doesn't look like in prison for longer sentences. That's a torture way to say it. But ultimately, the support that he gets from this particular community, mind you, this was the president that destroyed welfare. 70% of those people that were on welfare were kids. And beyond destroying welfare, Bill Clinton signed a bill that he knew was going to end up creating a much larger disparity in the number of African Americans going to prison for the same crimes. I mean, ultimately, you had this difference between crack and cocaine, where there was 100-to-1 sentencing for crack as opposed to cocaine, even though they're chemically pretty much the same thing. They're just different forms of the same drug. African Americans would tend to get crack because it was cheaper. Whites would tend to get cocaine, and yet you would have this situation where, despite being very similar, if not the same drug, people being in prison 100-to-1 ratio. It's fucking amazing. Bill Clinton signed this anyway. He knew what was going to take place. He knew it was going to explode the prison population from the standpoint of African Americans. He did it anyway, under this idea of triangulation. Triangulation. Fortunately, there are some people who think like me, who are of my racial persuasion. And when Bill Clinton is with some other African Americans that are cooning for the ex-president, gets her feelings across. It gets her feelings across in unvarnished wording. Let's take a look at this. This is awesome. And I hope you guys can hear this okay.
That was Bill Clinton on the receiving end of some harsh...
That was Bill Clinton on the receiving end of some harsh words. That's putting it mildly. And just so we're very clear on what she's saying, I mean, she's talking about mandatory minimums, and the mandatory minimums were bad, yes. But again, you also have this thing of the 100-to-1 that Bill Clinton knew about. This is Thomas Frank. I'm going to let Thomas Frank explain this, because Thomas Frank has a very clear point of view on this stuff. So let's flip over to Thomas. This is The Guardian. Let's see. So Thomas Frank makes an interesting point that says, at the exact same time where Bill Clinton was deregulating Wall Street, meaning allowing them to run free, run like the wind, and be corrupt as you want to be corrupt, as he was allowing them to be more corrupt, he was simultaneously bringing down the full weight of the government on the backs of the poor. Let's listen to him. For one class of Americans, Clinton brought emancipation, a prayed-for deliverance out of Glass-Steagall's house of bondage. For another class of Americans, Clinton brought discipline, long prison stretches for drug users, perpetual insecurity for welfare mothers, and intimidation for blue-collared workers, whose bosses Clinton thoughtfully armed with NAFTA. Essentially, for an entire class of Americans, he bought the boot of either enterprise or the government down on the backs of the people who, you could say, were the most vulnerable. What is shocking in our current journalistic journal historical understanding of the Clinton years is the idea that the mass imprisonment of people of color was an unintended consequence, in quotes, of the 1994 crime bill, to quote the New York Daily News phrase for Hillary Clinton. This is flatly, glaringly false as the final ugly chapter of the crime bill story unfolds or confirms. Back in the early 1990s, and although they were chemically almost identical, crack and powder cocaine were regarded as different by the law. The drug identified with black users, crack, was treated as though it were 100 times as villainous as the same amount of cocaine, a drug popular with affluent professionals. This, now notorious 100-to-1 sentencing disparity, as the New York Times put it, had been enacted in 1986, and the 1994 crime bill instructed the U.S. Sentencing Commission to study the subject and adjust federal sentencing as it saw fit. The Sentencing Commission duly recommended that the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity be abolished, largely because, as the lengthy report on the subject put it, the 100-to-1 crack cocaine to powder cocaine quality ratio is primarily the cause of the growing disparity of sentences for blacks and white federal defendants. By the time the crime report was released, however, Republicans had gained control of Congress and passed a bill explicitly overturning the decision of the Sentencing Commission. Bernie Sanders, for the record, voted against that bill. I'm glad you added that in. The bill went to Bill Clinton's desk for approval. Shortly before it came to his desk, he gave an inspiring speech deploring mass incarceration of black Americans. Blacks are right to think something is terribly wrong, he said on that occasion. When there were more African American men in our correction system than in our colleges, when almost 1 in 3 African American men in the 20s are either in jail and parole or otherwise under supervision of criminal justice, nearly 1 in 3. How heartfelt and inspiring Bill Clinton can give those speeches. 2 weeks after that speech, however, Clinton blandly affixed his signature to the bill retaining the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity, a disparity that had brought the lopsided incarceration of black people. Clinton could have vetoed it, but he didn't. He signed it. Today, we're told mass incarceration was an unintended consequence of Clinton's deeds. For that to be true, however, Clinton would have had to ignore the Sentencing Commission's finding, but also to ignore the newspaper stories appearing all around him, which can be found easily on the internet to this day. Here's one that appeared in the Baltimore Sun on the 31st of October, 1995, in which it noted that civil rights organization had telephoned campaign to pressure the president to veto the bill. At a rally last week in Chicago, Reverend Jesse Jackson said that Mr. Clinton had the chance, with one stroke of your veto pen, to correct the most grievous racial injustice bill built into our legal system. It is impossible to imagine Bill Clinton, the brilliant Rhodes Scholar, didn't understand what everyone was saying. How could he sign such a thing right after giving a speech deploring its effects? How can he and his wife now claim it was an accident when the consequences were being discussed everywhere at the time, when everyone was warning and even begging him not to do it? When that woman is giving Bill Clinton a tongue lashing, Bill Clinton has earned his tongue lashing.
Words last night. Clinton was in Watts, California, campaigning at a restaurant for his wife. The criticism came from a woman in the crowd who was upset about the former president signing a controversial federal crime bill in 1994 that created lengthy sentences for many drug offenses. That was Bill Clinton on the receiving end of some harsh words last night.
Yeah. That woman was pissed off, and I gotta be honest, she has a right to be. So, let's see, when is this? Maybe this one is old. Yeah, maybe this one is old. I mean, there's no way he's out campaigning for his wife right now at this very moment. Oh well. They're still floating about. When these Clintons just go away and rot in hell, yeah, I kind of wish they go away too. That said, though, this is old, or it's 2020. Yeah, this was probably old. The Clintons will go down as an accelerant to the downfall of America. It may be old, but still, I like it. I'll go with it. We'll say not again. With all the props for Clinton and her scumbag husband. Yeah, this one may be an old one, but it's an oldie but a goodie. I love it. Either way, that woman is right. She's absolutely right. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. I wish I never heard that name again. Unfortunately, Trudy, if she's thinking about running, you may be hearing it all over again. There are pictures of Bill Clinton standing with the KKK. Are you serious? Oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. All right, I'm going to end this here. Yeah, I'm going to do that one. J. Scott, that's next. that's next. All right, I'll end it. All right, guys. You all have a good one. I'll see you guys shortly. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks all.